Great. Welcome, Tom. All right, so
Yeah,
why don't we start with introductions? I'm Sam Gold. I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, also known as RiverCOG. We're your regional planning organization. Why don't the rest of RiverCOG staff introduce themselves? Torrance?
Torrance Downs, I'm the Deputy Director at RiverCOG.
And Megan?
I'm Megan Juflis.
Oh, a little bit of feedback. Megan Juflis, our Senior Center, and everyone else take turns introducing yourselves.
Steve Bull, Planning and Zoning.
Welcome.
Adam.
Tom Woodley from Conservation Commission and Wetlands Commission in Haddam.
Great.
Gail Reynolds, Haddam Conservation Commission, Wetlands, Land Trust, and the Plan of Conservation and Development Implementation Committee.
Great.
I'm Jim McCutcheon. I represent Haddam Neck and the conservation of it and the river.
Great.
Ed Shreen, Haddam Bulletin, and resident of Haddam.
Welcome.
Hey, Ed.
Hi.
Bill Warner, Town Planner.
Oh, Bill Warner, Town Planner. Welcome. Maurice?
Maurice Adams, live in Haddam, not officially on anything, but representing the green and blue way that we've been working on. So we have tying these things together.
Great. And I think that leaves Melissa. So
yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks for holding this meeting. Melissa Schwab from Save the Sound and Haddam Bulletin.
I'm Missy.
We also have Diane from the Historical Society. So thank you, Diane Hutchinson.
And Liz Bazazzi, too.
And Liz,
Liz.
we're introducing ourselves. So Liz, introduce yourself once you unmute yourself.
Unmute.
There's a little microphone icon in the lower left, and that will unmute you.
I don't think that's us. Am I coming on?
Oh, yeah, you're unmuted, but I'm talking to Liz, so she can introduce herself. Oh,
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm an architect, live in Higganum, and I've been very active in attempting to revitalize Higganum Center for about 25 years.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. And also one other, Conra, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you're muted as well. So there's the icon in the lower left. There's a little microphone icon. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary Jean Conrad, and I'm just I'm representing the library and hoping that we can do some nice things for the town.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. All right. So with that, with all the introductions, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mute everyone and just unmute our presenters. Just 1 second. Let's see. Mute all. And then I'm going to, just give me 1 second. I will unmute Torrance and just let me get Megan. So Megan, you can unmute yourself, I think.
Great.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to we'll start the presentation, and I think I think I saw someone else joining us potentially for a second. We have Tium Tehran joining us. Welcome, welcome to this presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So let's. I will start the PowerPoint.
Let the fun begin.
Okay, Megan, you can start the presentation.
Great. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Thank you also to the Haddam Planning and Zoning Commission for allowing us this time to speak with you this evening. As we mentioned earlier, I'm Megan Juflis. I'm a senior planner with the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, or RiverCOG. Joining me in giving this presentation is our Executive Director, Sam Gold, and we're also joined by our Deputy Director, Torrance Downs. We would like to begin this meeting with a brief presentation followed by an open discussion based on the 5 questions that were circulated prior to the meeting. Everyone but the presenters will be muted for the presentation portion, and we will unmute speakers for the discussion portion. We'll go over more of the procedural matters for the discussion portion when we get there. We expect this presentation to last approximately 1 hour. And with that, let's begin. Why are we here? As a reminder, RiverCOG, the Regional Planning Committee, or RPC, and our consultant Fitzgerald and Halliday are working on the first regional plan of conservation and development for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region. On June 29th and July 7th, we held a region-wide introductory presentation that offered a primer on RiverCOG, the Regional Planning Committee, RPC, and the RPOCD. We'll begin tonight's presentation with a brief recap of the key takeaways from the introductory presentation, which is also available to view on the project website, rivercogregionalplan.org. We'll then spend a few minutes explaining what we mean by the region and why it's important to think regionally. The purpose of this discussion is to focus our perspective. Although we're here to hear about your town's issues, it's important to keep in mind that we're creating a regional plan. So our focus should be on how your town's issues and goals fit into the region as a whole. We'll highlight some examples of this by showcasing a few goals from your POCD and comparing them to the goals of other towns across the region. Then we'll turn to the rest of the meeting over to you to discuss your responses to the 5 questions that were circulated before the meeting. Getting ahead of myself. At the introductory presentation, we set out to answer a few key questions, which I'll briefly recap. Why are we here? As I mentioned at the outset, we're creating the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. What is RiverCOG? Regional Planning Organization for the Lower Connecticut River Valley. What is the RPC? The RPC is made up of appointed representatives from each of our 17 municipalities and has been tasked to oversee the creation of the RPOCD. What is the RPOCD? It's a visionary policy document that guides land use patterns in the region over the next 10 years. Also at the introductory presentation, we answered the question of why we think regionally. Because thinking regionally can help our municipalities solve common problems and achieve common goals. But what do we mean by the region? Specifically, we're talking about the Lower Connecticut River Valley, which is made up of 17 municipalities: Chester, Clinton, Cromwell, Deep River, Durham, East Haddam, East Hampton, Essex, Haddam, Killingworth, Lyme, Middlefield, Middletown, Old Lyme, Old Saybrook, Portland, and Westbrook. Each of these municipalities is unique in character, but their geographic proximity means that certain common conditions will exist among them and that certain issues and goals will necessarily be shared. In addition, many issues and goals will have impacts that cross municipal boundaries. In other words, what happens in Haddam could have impacts that reach Chester. The unique character of each municipality also means that each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Our municipalities are interdependent, relying on each other in areas such as housing, jobs, infrastructure, and critical public service. As part of the RPOCD, we will be examining these common issues and goals, as well as the areas where our towns are interdependent, and provide a roadmap for coordination and cooperation. As part of this effort, hearing from you about what matters to your town is critically important. Although this is the first RPOCD for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region, it is important to reiterate that we are not starting from zero. Our analysis of common issues and goals began with a review of municipal POCDs for all 17 municipalities. After our review, we compared POCDs and found that they do in fact share a great deal in common. Let's look at some of the goals from Haddam's POCD. But first, I'd like to note that these goals were chosen to showcase the breadth of the topics covered and were not meant to imply any level of particular importance. So 1, encourage a variety of housing types, both ownership and rental, that can meet market demand for alternatives to large lot single family. 2, improve mobility within Higganum and connections between the center of Higganum and nearby destinations. 3, promote energy efficient alternatives to single occupancy vehicles such as ride sharing, mass transportation, bicycling, and walking, and integrate them into the transportation network. And 4, focus on ecotourism efforts, especially reestablishing Haddam's historical connection to the Connecticut River. When we looked across the region at other municipal POCDs, these goals were widely shared. All 17 towns had goals related to diversifying housing stock. 14 towns had goals related to creating connectivity between key nodes. All 17 towns also had goals related to improving bicycle and pedestrian connections, and 16 towns had goals related to tourism and recreation. 14 of those had language specific to the waterfront. Now I'll turn it over to Sam for the discussion portion.
Yes, thank you, Megan. So now is the time of the meeting for us to hear from you. We've reviewed your plans and made regional comparisons based on the data of your own professional experience. But you and Haddam, you have an intimate understanding of how it functions, what it needs, and what makes it special. Before we turn to the 5 questions, we'd like to go over some procedural matters. We will look at the questions one at a time with 10 minutes of discussion. If you'd like to speak, there is under the participation participants, you can raise your hand, or you can just raise your hand on the. Well, we may not see that, so we'd like to take turns. So what I'll if you go to if you click on the link on the button that says participants, there will be a little button that says raise your hand. If no one else is speaking and you're unable to raise your hand and find that button, you can start asking your question, but we ask people to let each other speak and be courteous to each other. Try to keep your comments to a couple minutes so everyone can get a chance to speak. If we have time, we'll go back to you. We also can come back at the end of the 50 minutes for each one of the total for the 5 questions to discuss any of these items in greater detail or cover any other issues. And I apologize. That's Lola. She is not.
Lola.
Yeah. So I have Lola who's barking at me. All right. Finally, and I think importantly, just 1 second.
You want me to take it, Sam?
Sorry, I was going to just have her join us. But anyway, finally, we understand that these are some big topics to be discussed in only 10 minutes, and that not everyone is comfortable speaking on Zoom, speaking live in front of people. So if you have any thoughts or comments on any of these questions, and you're not able to express yourself this evening, we encourage you to reach out to us. You can reach out to Megan Juflis at her email address, which will be at the bottom of every question slide. You can also reach out to your RPC representative, Raul Debrigard, and he will get those questions to us, and we will get you answers. So, and we will share with you his email address at the end of the meeting. So let's move on to the first question, and I'm going to mute myself to allow for discussions. So what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley?
This is vision questions always seem to be the one they're hard to talk about. But, you know, when you think about the lower Connecticut River, the region, the 17 towns.
So we have a couple people raising their hands. So Liz, why don't you speak? Just unmute yourself before you start speaking. You're still not.
There we go. Okay. Hi, thanks. I think it would be really, I've thought for a long time, it would be really terrific to brand this region in the way that the Berkshires is a known entity, a collection of towns, or the Litchfield Hills, or Pioneer Valley, and then take advantage of that by promoting the whole region, both you know, our commonalities and our unique, each town's unique qualities, but to have a website that promotes, like, instead of just Haddam promoting our events and Chester promoting their events, this website come at this from in a holistic way, so that we promote the whole region. We're little teeny towns. All together we make like a small city. Yeah, I mean we do have Middletown Saybrook, but I just think that would be really beneficial. In addition to that, and related to that, just promoting, of course, our assets like Haddam Meadows and the Scenic Highway 154, preserving view corridors all along 154. And I know that's not important to all the 17 towns, but it maintains spacing between historic commercial nodes and differentiating the routes on 154, where, you know, narrowing the road and calming traffic so people actually can notice like our amazing historic assets. And also I just wanted to mention regarding the website that there is a website called haddamtrails.org, which is fairly well visited, and that could be expanded to just, you know, lower, whatever we call ourselves, lower Connecticut Valley, and hopefully something a little catchier, but, you know, where we have this one website that has all the trails and another like little small detail that's important. If we want to attract people, cyclists, which I know we get tons of cyclists in our town that come in like troops, and but a public bathroom is a huge asset to a cyclist, as well as a paddler. I know, just getting paddle launches, getting campsites along the Connecticut River for source to sound paddlers, blah, blah, blah. I can go on, but I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Liz. I see Gail has her hand raised. Go ahead, Gail.
Well, one thing that I like about all the small towns here, I mean, even in parts of Middletown, there's sort of a sleepiness and a slowness it's not a detriment, it's an asset, because there's not, you know, there are in a lot of places there are more trees than people, and I think that's a good thing. And you know, being with a natural resources and horticulture background, I think that you know, in order, if ecotourism is to be important, that you need to pay attention to the eco part of that. And you know, like formal British gardens are not part of that eco. We need to make sure that our wildlands and our unfragmented forest land are preserved and even protected, are enlarged and connected, so that we'll have that resource and it won't get gobbled up by development whenever things take off. I mean, it's been a quiet, you know, like what, 10, 12 years, which has been fine, but we have to keep an eye on that to make sure it doesn't get out of control.
Thank you very much, Gail. I see Tium Turan has his hand raised. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I just want to build on, I think, what Liz was talking about earlier, which is I think there is a huge opportunity for us to, and what you guys are doing, or trying to do, to act as a region and not individual towns. And I think of the lower Connecticut River Valley, I really hadn't thought of Westbrook and Clinton as connected. I just think of the ones, although I love Westbrook and Clinton, they're not necessarily part of the river. Yes, they have tributaries, but I don't really see them as the river, but that's beside the point. I guess what I would love to see is greater connectivity. And if we all believe, and it sounds like most of the towns do, in more ecotourism, we do have potential to do that with rails and trails for part of the entire length, but trails for many parts where frankly you can't have both. And I would argue that probably the trails should win out there. But I think for all of that to work and the connectivity to work, the most important thing I think would be to get all of the towns to agree that there will be, I'm going to make this up the number, 8 or 9 critical points that are across this region that need to be developed as hubs for that tourism that would be funded cooperatively, and therefore also the revenue would be spread back cooperatively against them. Because I believe if you don't do that, no town can actually do this on their own or will be willing to do so on their own.
Great, that's an excellent comment. Thank you very much. Next is Thomas Worthley. Please unmute yourself.
I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to put a word in echoing what Gail mentioned about the large unfragmented open spaces that we have. Also, there's a history here of working lands, small farms and that sort of thing that I would like to see encouraged because it's authentic and it's not like we're living in a park somewhere, but that people are actually doing things on the land that keep the land open. And without those connections to the large open spaces, then all the trails and all the tourism and all of that that comes for the clean water and comes for the birds and comes for the views, they wouldn't come without the large open spaces that we have. And so when we talk about building connections, I would like to see connections between those open spaces remain as much as possible and enhanced as much as possible too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Next is Raul Rpocd, our RPC, your RPC representative. So just unmute yourself, Raul. You're still muted.
This is just a follow-up to the idea that Liz Bazazzi brought up with a little history. Some of us, some years back, initiated the idea of turning 154 into a scenic highway. And the idea was to have it start here in Haddam and go all the way down to Old Saybrook. However, in those days, due to lack of unity, when we hit Chester, Chester said no. So much for that idea. But those of us who've traveled down 154 have noticed that it's really almost like a continuous, not a continuous city, but a continuous village. I mean, there are breaks, but there are amazing continuity of urban clusters. So the idea was to tie the whole thing into one entity, if you wish, give it a coherent identity from one end to the other, so that people wouldn't just think of little towns, but would think of one coherent thing. And we were not just thinking of tourists. We thought that as residents, we would all benefit if we thought more of this as one entity, that if you wanted a good sandwich shop, you'd find it in Chester. And if you wanted a good clothing store, you'd find it in Essex, and so forth. That is, each of us had things to contribute to the other. So we weren't entirely dependent on, going to Hartford or New Haven, but rather could see the beauty of what this town has to offer as a region. So I bring that up as something that might strike along the lines of what Liz was talking about.
I think that's a great idea. So I think we have time for like one more quick comment on what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley. If anyone wants to speak or raise their hand, go ahead. Maurice, go ahead.
I would like to comment. Thank you, Sam. Sort of tying some of these things together. For example, first of all, Liz talked about trail sites and trail maps and overall website, and then also mentioned public restrooms. If you possibly use Essex as an example of this with a public restroom, it's a great asset there. You can go into town, walk all around, public restroom. It's a really important thing. Raul talks about a coherent identity, and how I would like to get to that, I absolutely agree with it, is that when I first got started on working on this, it was looking at the Connecticut Valley Railroad State Park and realizing that the railroad and Department of Transportation was not really thinking of a state park in terms of outdoor recreation, which was the reason that we were able to purchase this land in the first place from the railroads. And so we thought a little bit about that, and it has evolved somewhat. I started working on something called the Connecticut Riverline Trail, because we have the railroad going right down next to the river. If we had trails there, you could tie them together, just be wonderful. But it was a little bit of a limited look at it. The next thing that's happened are the rail bikes with the railroad. And I think this has been a real opening of almost the floodgates, because there are people on these tracks with the rail bikes participating and doing outdoor recreation and not just one-time scenic riding in a train. It's a real change in what's happened. For different reasons it's happened, but the railroad, VRR, has put this together, and I think it's been a tremendous success. So a few of us have been working on how do you bring all of these comments together, and I sent it around to everyone, but I'm not sure you got it. It sort of looks like this. It's called the Connecticut Green and Blue Way. And the idea is to, just what Raul was talking about, tying all of our assets together from Middletown down to Old Saybrook. And like the other comment, doesn't quite include every community, but it's the guts of it there. And it could be a great marketing thing in terms of just saying, well, come see Haddam Meadows State Park, or come see the Green in Essex, or individual things like that. And even the Goodspeed Opera House, as famous as it is, it's one thing. If we can tie these together and kind of have a common name for it, and the green represents hiking and trails and trails with the rails, and then the blue way is, of course, the Connecticut River, and it's been designated a historic blue way. And sort of give it an overall theme, like some of you have talked about, as a package. And then that way, the idea would be you have more of an asset for our residents, more things to do, hiking, biking, and all these things. And as well, when you bring tourists in for ecotourism, hopefully they will stay more than just one day for one event.
Great. Thank you very much, Maurice. James, I don't know if you have a quick comment you want to make before we move on to the next question. You're muted, so unmute yourself. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the business of making sure that we have a place for the wildlife in the area. That is important if we want people to be able to go out and share with nature. Haddam Neck, of course, lends itself to that because we're a peninsula, and you get down to the far end, there's not much there, except one big challenge for us, which is to preserve the Connecticut Yankee Atomic Power Plant land. And I'm pleased to say that we're optimistic that that will happen eventually. But we have a lot of participants who are interested in this. U.S. Fish and Wildlife has us as a target. We now are the Salmon River Division of the Conti Refuge. We've certainly, the state of Connecticut has bought property in the area. the Sunrise Resort and Macamudis. You got the Salmon River right there. There's a lot of concentrated contiguous preserved property. We want to try to keep that up if we can, because it will help the whole area in terms of maintaining wildlife and so on coming through the area.
Great. Well, thank you very much, James. So without objection, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, what do you see as Haddam's role in the region? So who wants to take a stab at that? So we covered of overall vision of this river valley, but what do you see the roles that roles that Haddam can play in supporting the larger regional vision? So who wants to go first? Turan, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. I think one of the things we have spoken about as a town is one of the things I think that we differentiates us from perhaps the other towns in the River Valley is the sheer magnitude of open space and wildlife refuges we have. So it would seem to me that while Essex may be again, forgive me for profiling and stereotyping, and I don't mean to do that, but Essex may be the shipping or the maritime center of this river valley. Perhaps we would be the eco center, given Haddam, given Swan Hill and the Meadows and Heard State Park and Seymour State Park. There's huge opportunity to create opportunity for people to experience all of that, even including the gorgeous creek we have here and waterfalls we have. And I think if you put all those things together, the magnitude of that open space and ecology is unique.
Thank you very much. So Liz is next. Remember to unmute.
Okay, getting better. So some of the things I said before in terms of, well, I'll just repeat what Tim says. Green hills and waterways, like we have the hills, therefore we have all these creeks that empty into the cove, that empty into the river. And because of them, we had a rich industrial past. At one point, maybe not all at the same time, but we had 24 industrial sites in Higganum alone. So kind of looking at, I think those are the things that make up our unique sense of place here, both the open space and our kind of simple, we're not a pretentious place. I always feel like it feels very authentic here. Like we're not full of, Tim, don't listen. We're not full of New Yorkers. It really has a nice New England feeling in Higganum, and I think that's one of the things that differentiates it. And I think maybe East Haddam shares that also. So anyway, looking at those things, Haddam's green hills and blue waterways. So maybe non-motorized recreational trails, biking, hiking, snowshoeing, Nordic skiing. These are all things that I do, and I think a lot of people that are from town that are on this talk do. And I think a really great example that I was turned on to last fall was Vermont's Kingdom Trails Network, where a bunch of towns got together and worked as one thing. And I think that might be, I think you buy a season's pass for access to those trails. I'm not sure exactly how it works. I personally am opposed to anything that costs money to have access to nature, because I think access to nature is essential to humans. Anyway, and then the other thing, Tim also mentioned the Cove, and it's just such an amazingly beautiful site. And no one even in our town, like some people in our town don't even know about it, but that's our one point of access to the river. our dump is our only real access to the river. But with that site, we can have water access to the river anyway. We don't have land directly on the river. But for fishing, kayak launch, and then maybe things that are complementary to this image of ourselves as these green hills and blue waters, like kayak rentals, maybe for hikers or anything, some kind of supplies, or even boaters. Kind of connecting people up in from the river to the town, funneling them in. And then the industrial site, the industrial heritage, we have like one of the most beautiful forges in the state that's been recognized by the Connecticut Trust as such, and which is the Scoville Forge adjacent to the Higginham Green. And that's just wants to be makerspace. Like, I'm a big proponent of looking at traditional forms of settlement, patterns of settlement. And, you know, we had a live, work, play village, like we had the housing and the commerce that grew up around the factories. And so kind of building on that same thing. So putting makerspace or something where something's actually built or made in those spaces, and then creating more housing for the people that work there, blah, blah, blah. I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Liz. Next is Gail. Just take a moment to mute yourself.
Sure, thank you. You know, I've lived here for 35 years, and I've noticed that a lot of people in Haddam are constantly jealous of other towns, and they say, oh, well, we want our town to be like Essex, or we want our town to be like Chester, or, you know, name one of the other towns around here. And I think that we should not, you know, we are what we are, and I definitely agree with all the people who have been touting our town's natural resources, because they are plentiful and people should enjoy them, and they should be there for people to enjoy. But also, as Tom Worthley mentioned earlier, you know, there was like a patchwork of small farms, and we do, especially out our road, Candlewood Hill Road, where some of our town's best agricultural soils are located. We do have some small farms along there. So I think that our, you know, Haddam was never a big farm town, because by and large, you know, we're the Eastern Highlands and our soil is not that rich, but just, you know, in a few places it is. And I think that that should also be, I don't necessarily want to say promoted, but it should be acknowledged and, you know, given the opportunity to thrive and be part of our, you know, our role.
Great, thank you, Gail. So I think Hume was next. Go ahead.
I just had one more comment along the lines of what we've been talking about, which is in the spirit of how do you make all of this happen? I think there's been some conversation in our town, I suspect in others, about if we believe that we have gorgeous rivers on the planet and we have some extraordinary parks that allow for amazing exploration, we also have the opportunity to celebrate the, perhaps in a connect all through have a better environmental games. You have Olympics, you have all kinds of games going on around the world. Could we do something that was environmentally correct, that was related to a sport? We used to have for better or for worse, we used to have an amazing thing, which was you had to make your own raft. And we had a raft race that ran from Middletown to Haddam Meadows, and then from Haddam Meadows to Essex, and notwithstanding problems with it, it was the kind of thing that was unique and could draw people. Could we do something like that on a much larger scale, maybe smaller to begin with, that would draw people and help define us as that kind of eco-touristic tourism site to go to? It would make it real.
Thank you. So I'm going to call on Raul next, and then maybe we'll move on to the next question if there's no other questions. So go ahead, Raul.
I just want to point out, let's say the obvious, we're the only town that is on both sides of the river. And so that's a unique role, if you wish. But we're also the only town really that has a, let's say, a bridge across the river. Now I realize Old Saybrook also has a bridge across the river, but the bridge is of such magnitude that it's hard to have any intimate relationship from one side of to the other at that point in the river. But in case of Haddam, it's a very intimate relationship. And one of the things that we have failed in the past is to, and I'm sorry that there isn't a greater representation at this get-together from East Haddam, because we really haven't really managed to do something that really capitalizes on this unique aspect of the town of Haddam. And in this case, East Haddam, that we're right across from each other, and we're sort of like brother and sister, if you wish. And we haven't, for example, we've never held any sort of joint festival or anything like that that would sort of bring people to sort of capitalize on both sides, the town on both sides of the river. And that's an opportunity that really should be pursued.
Well, I will put in a plug for RiverCOG in cooperation with Haddam and East Haddam and the Connecticut DOT. We did put in for a grant application for a walkway on the Haddam Swing Bridge. So we're hoping that if this project gets funded and built, that we'll have that connection to be able to have a festival on both sides of the river at the same time, and we're really hopeful for that. So, Bill Warner, go ahead. Oh, let me. You're muted at the moment, so just you have to unmute yourself.
Just wanted to point out that we are going forward with the sidewalk project. So in the spring, we'll be building sidewalks from Saybrook Road all the way down over the railroad tracks to the swing bridge. And so if we get that grant, then all of Tylerville will be connected to the swing bridge and across the bridge into East Haddam. And that could really be a game changer. And it includes the decorative lights and the landscaping and everything in Tylerville. And there are developers interested in 105 Bridge Street for diversity in housing, for multifamily housing, and also on Brooks Court over there. So there is interest in Tylerville, and that really, of our two centers, both of them should be kind of, I don't want to say economic engines, but the centers of commerce, what they always were.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm going to, unless there's anyone else who wants to say anything about this, I will move on to the next question. We can always go back later. The next question is, what are the challenges your town is facing that would be easier to address working regionally with neighboring towns? And I also should say, I should have said this in the beginning, is that a number of the things you've said to answers to previous questions are applicable to future questions. So the examples that you've given about promoting the brand for tourism, for hiking trail access, multimodal access, we'll take all that input and organize it appropriately. So we do realize that sometimes these questions get answered before we get to them. So anything new you would have to add would be, or new ideas you have on this. I think Gail has raised her hand. Go ahead.
Well, Haddam already has a regional school district with Killingworth. And I think that continuing to not necessarily regionalize with other towns, but to share resources, because I'm a Yale alum and I interview prospective students, and I find that students who are in either Middletown, which has a lot of resources in a big high school, or the regional towns, they have more opportunities and more faculty and just ways to learn more. When we used to have when the high school still had block scheduling, the kids were able to take classes at Wesleyan in the afternoons and stuff. And I think that just like making it easier to share educational resources will give our students, the head start they need to achieve well in college and in their adult lives. in the towns that aren't regionalized, there just aren't as many opportunities for the kids academic because it's just not cost effective.
Thank you, Gail. I think I see Liz. Go ahead, Liz.
Hi. So I guess what I want to say is I just want to underscore what Raul said and maybe build on it in terms of connecting with East Haddam Village. And I've always pictured kind of Budapest, where we're two towns, but we become one. So if you picture a dumbbell where the bridge is the bar, we mirror in scale and texture East Haddam Village, but not where everyone always. So I think that Tylerville, well, I'll just say in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's mind, Tylerville is really an area that benefits from the highway entrance and exit and has car-centric uses that make sense there, gas stations and kind of plazas and things that make it easy. And hopefully, you know, that will change to some degree. But I think that if we can envision something separate from that image of Tylerville, directly adjacent to, or as closely adjacent to the river as possible, so that really we can picture like Budapest, and we start to be one town, because East Haddam could expand, but they're limited by their geography, and we could just, they could bleed over to our side. But I think that it really, a unified image is critical in terms of form and texture. So
yeah, not unlike how Mystic is actually, there is no town of Mystic.
yes, right, yeah, and I only learned that last year. It's really cool, but that's exactly like Mystic, yeah.
It's half Stonington, half Groton. All right,
Right.
Tim, go ahead.
Just to build on perhaps something I said earlier, you know, I think I hear it time and again, and I obviously, since I've said it tonight, I agree that ecotourism is something I think that would be special for us. I don't believe that we can do that on our own. I do believe that if we were to create the equivalent of the Outward Bound games, that they would require us to engage with other towns, and that we should do it because it would be beneficial for all. If we were to develop a point of view that was regional like that, I think it would be easier for the towns to allocate monies to try and help do things like in our case, restore Higginham Cove. So that beyond the grants the bill is trying to get for the Cove, could we actually finally take something that we were greatly pleased to acquire and make it what it could have been or what it looked like when the EPA finished and maintain it? We don't have the gumption to do it, I don't think, because I don't think we have the incentive, because it's not connected to other things that might bring in revenue.
Thank you. Who else? Oh, Raul, and then Maurice. Oh, you're muted, Raul.
Mentioned two things, different themes that have to be done better regionally. For the small towns in the region, I think to attract industry and even commerce, I think being able to work as a group is much more likely to be effective in reaching outside of the region and attracting others to come here. The Middlesex Chamber of Commerce does a great job, but they really very much focus on places like Middletown. And I think if the towns want to do something on their own here, these smaller towns, either with the help of the Chamber of Commerce, they really have to produce something together rather than each trying to beat each other to the game. But the other more important thing is housing. I attended the other day, well, I guess it was 3 or maybe close to a month, time passes, a Black Lives Matter meeting here in Haddam, and it's pointed out that really the concentration of races in this region is very much focused on big towns, for example, Middletown. And obviously the reason for that is that housing opportunities for low income and middle income people are very limited outside of those towns, especially rental, small, there's affordable rental. And I think that is a problem that we have to solve. And the solution is not going to come out until the region gets together and figures out how to deal with it. It's not something any one town can do. That's all.
Raul, so we have Maurice. Go ahead.
This is a quick comment. It is not thought out at all, but someone had mentioned earlier about like outward bound games or something like that. You know, San Francisco has a very famous race every year called Bay to Breakers. Maybe we could come up with something like the River to the Sound run or biking or something like that, which could include Clinton and you know, that we haven't been talking about before that's not normally along the river, but maybe there's something that could be worked out there.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you. And then Liz, and then we'll move on.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump back in again, but the housing was something on my list too, and I wanted to just expand again on Raul. I'm always on your piggybacking you, but that I think that a lot of times I feel that in our town we're looking for the silver bullet, or you know, the big landfall where we get this huge developer that's going to do something really big. And I think that instead it would be really wonderful to really incentivize small incremental development, both for in the villages, both for retail spaces and housing, hopefully combined, and to make these, both the retail and the housing, affordable by scale. And that will help with one of the big problems we have in our town, and I assume that it's region-wide, is keeping high school graduates in town, getting college graduates to return to town, and also keeping giving places where people my age and older can stay in town and maybe be in a walkable, affordable place when it's getting harder to have places with land. And related to that, right now, I'm not familiar with the zoning regs of other towns, but in our town, in order to do an accessory dwelling unit, you need a 2-acre lot. And if anything, if I had my way, I would reverse it. So only like lots that are less than, the village lots are really where we want to bring the density. We don't want to develop, we don't want to become this big suburban town. We want to maintain our rural character. And so bringing the density to the village by allowing not only accessory dwelling units, but something I just read about yesterday, which is ACUs, accessory commercial units, to the village. So, but the whole thought of doing, like, you know, lighter, quicker, cheaper, smaller places, smaller spaces, which makes them more affordable.
Oh, thank you very much, Liz. Any other comments from anyone? Okay, Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Sam, you had mentioned you applied for a grant for the swing bridge. Was that on behalf of East Haddam or RiverCOG?
It actually was a joint application between the two towns and RiverCOG, with the support, obviously, of the Department of the Transportation.
Okay, and is that the one that's been on the books for several years? Yes.
So this is actually the third time we've applied for this federal grant.
Right. As a joint, both towns together.
Right. I think it's our understanding that the DOT, since they're running the overall larger project and they own the bridge, that they will end up being responsible for the project. But the applicant in this case are the towns jointly with RiverCOG.
So obviously the challenges, the first thing that come to my mind is money and access to funds and grants. So I think that approach, hitting it with both towns, both sides, hitting the state or the federal government is the way to go, is a good way to go.
And by going in with both towns on both sides, highlighting how both towns are going to take advantage of this federal investment,
right,
obviously makes for a better case. So, and also the regional support from the RiverCOG. So, yeah, yeah. So thank you for the comments. We have Thomas, and then I think he'll be the last on this question. But go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on what Liz was talking about in terms of accessory units and accessory commercial units and that sort of thing. Focused on the village, yes, I agree with that. It is one step towards protecting the open spaces to redevelop better, more intelligently than what we might have done in the past. And you know, certainly looking at spaces around the region that you know, are kind of falling into disrepair or falling into ruin, rather than develop someplace new, let's incentivize some way of redeveloping in a smarter way. But I wouldn't necessarily close the door on an accessory dwelling associated with something that's out of town or out of the village, because that could be part of a solution towards you know, retaining some of those young people that, you know, come back from college. They don't want to move back in with mom and dad, but they might be willing to live next door, if you follow me, you know. So just wanted to make that comment. That's all.
Great. Thank you very much, Thomas. And if there are no more speakers, I'll move on to question number 4. What do we do well in our region? What can we do better in our region? So who wants to take first shot at that question? All right, Tim, go ahead.
Well, I think it's fundamentally what this is all about, which is what we don't do well is we don't act like a region. We act like individual municipalities or towns, and Essex is for Essex and Saybrook is for Saybrook. And we don't act as a region. We've never organized that way. You know, to some degree, I think the only group that is like that is the people who are the watchdogs for the river that cross the towns. We don't have that situation. You guys are trying to create that. And so I don't think we do that well. I think that the towns are very Machiavellian in what they do. And not because out of maliciousness, it's just because they've never been organized to work together.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Steve, go ahead. Unmute yourself first.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
So what we have done for a number of years is the view towards both shores from the middle of the river, I think is magnificent. I haven't seen a lot of rivers in the world, but it's got to be one of the most beautiful rivers in the world. And every day that I go down there, I marvel at the beauty, at the natural beauty. And so that we do really, really well. Obviously, Gateway has been a big part of that for years. So there you go.
And, I'll point out for everyone who doesn't know this, Torrance is the staff to the Connecticut River Gateway Commission, and he does a good job supporting them in their mission. So thank you, Torrance. Anyone else want to weigh in on what we do well and what could we do better in? And for those who haven't spoken yet, please feel free to join the conversation. Bill, go ahead, Bill. Let's see, Bill, you're muted, so just unmute.
Something that really struck me was we're also putting sidewalks and rebuilding sidewalks in Haddam Center. And so I'm trying to come up with something that ties it all together. And really the quality and the character of the historic buildings in the center, which hasn't really gotten much focus, is really unique. And I had the opportunity to walk with Lisa Malloy down the corridor talking about all the different buildings and all the different people that lived in these buildings and the history of it and the original settlement and the original cemeteries and stuff. And every single little town has all those stories. And we haven't really tied them together because that's the one thing that we really have here is lots of history. And so how could you tie it all together into something more unique, something that works better and actually attracts people? I mean, the natural environment is great, but it's just interesting that, you know, I was walking down the street in Durham on Main Street, and I learned by one of the signs there that Austin, Texas, the founder of Austin, Texas, lived on Main Street in Durham. And there's all those stories that I don't think we celebrate very well.
That is a great story, and I'm sure there's plenty more like that. So thank you very much, Bill. All right, Thomas, go ahead.
Well, a suggestion I would make that in terms of what we could do better might be some sort of, and it would have to be online, but also a print version of a handbook for the region that is divided into categories. Much like you find, if you travel to Europe, you can buy a handbook about a certain country that gives you the history and gives you the places to go for a cup of coffee and the places to go for the best bread and the places to go hiking and the, where to find a cruise and where to find an art museum and, to put all that together in one little handbook that could be directed at people from out of the region or for tourists, or even for people within the region who haven't explored it thoroughly, could be something that we might put some resources towards.
Right, that's a good idea, and there's other people who share that idea, but I'll leave that aside. I'll leave that for later. Anyone else? Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what Bill Warner just said. Our center is a historical center. If you want to attract people down here in Haddam, or at least in Haddam, you have to think about the historical surroundings. And we have an incredible jewel in the Haddam Center, which is the jail, which could be a museum, a jail museum, for the region. I mean, it's even in the entire United States, it's one of the only county jail that were put in place in the 1800s. And what we don't do well in our town is kind of look at that and say, okay, this could be an incredible attraction comparable to the opera house, but instead we're looking for restaurants, we're looking for breweries, we're looking for all types of different things, and we don't really appreciate what we have in terms of historical assets that could really attract people to the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. And let's see, any other comments on what we do well and what we could do better? Okay, not seeing anything. I'll move on to the next question. And the final question is, how could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? And this is this question was envisioned with some of the land use commissioners in mind, who are overseeing land use regulations and overseeing their own town POCDs. But we want to know how our regional plan could support you and your town. So, Gail, go ahead.
Well, there's always, when you have more entities going for grants and other money, it always is more attractive to the grantors when you can do things, especially across town lines. I know I've been participating with the Lower Connecticut River Land Trust, where we did a regional how can I explain it? Not looking at boundaries, but just how to rank our natural resource sites using geographic information systems. And that's helpful when you need to make decisions. And I'm sure that, we've talked about other things like historical houses and other things that could just reinforce a lot of our individual plan of conservation and developments that we've done in all our different towns. If it can bring it a level up, it can help bring the towns together and also, again, attract funders.
Great, thank you, Gail. Steve, go ahead.
So as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're by and large, we're just 11 blokes sitting there trying to make good decisions. And we always make sure that our decisions are in concert with Gateway, that our decisions are in concert with our own POCD, and to add another one is just more input, which you need input from the outside. So it's really good.
Great. Thank you. And we hope that our goal here is to create a regional plan that is useful to our land use commissioners, because the land use powers reside in you for our towns and for our region. So if we can't create a document that's useful to you, it won't get addressed. It won't get used. So thank you for that comment. Let's see, Raul, go ahead. Oh, just unmute yourself. Raul, if you take a moment to unmute yourself first.
Hey, before Raul, before you talk, where the heck are you?
Where am I?
Of course.
Huh?
8 Christian Hill Road.
The heck's behind you?
El
Oh,
Capitan.
my name. Oh, that's the Yosemite. Yes.
Nice.
Forget about that.
Nice.
Oh, I wish I was. I'm right here in Higginham. Anyway, I was just going to say, appropriate enough, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think if you just many of these ideas, if you can show them visually, these articulations of what, for example, a corridor might look like following 154 and the towns around it, what the railroad valley would be like if it were, say a walking trail all the way along with the railroad from wherever to wherever. I think these ideas need to be shared regionally so that we can then pursue them. Same with historic resources, just seeing where they are might entice people to work together.
Thank you, Raul.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Thomas, go ahead.
Just a question, and you might already be doing this, based on support of Steve Bull in planning and zoning. Is there a way that the region could be on top of and share decisions, maybe not every single decision, but when a controversial decision comes up in one of the towns in our region, share how they handled that with other planning and zoning commissions in the region, so that people can see how did they handle this in Deep River? How did they handle this in Old Saybrook? And what are the differences and what are the similarities, and how might we strategize, whatever controversial situation it might happen to be? Is there a way that the region could help with that?
Yes, there are. There's a few processes that we currently do that can help. One process is in state statute. It's called the referral process, where regulations or zoning map changes or subdivisions are reviewed by the RiverCOG for intermunicipal impacts. Make sure your neighbors aren't doing something that would have an intermunicipal impact on you, or vice versa. So there is information sharing as part of that process. We also, I think more casually, as part of the regional planning committee, we do have these discussions about larger issues, and try to share information. And then finally, COVID has gotten in the way of this. Maybe we should just plan this anyway. Is that we do over the years have had a number of planners lunches where we bring people together to sort of talk about certain issues. One issue that pops up that was something that Chester dealt with was short-term rentals, and it's something which they had some issues with, and it's an issue that all of our towns are dealing with. How to properly regulate them, these are new and very different types of land uses, very different than the traditional vacation rentals and very different than a regular rental of housing. And in a time of Corona, that's also a concern as people coming out of other places are using Airbnbs and VRBO for getting out of wherever they're from. So I think the RiverCOG is a good vehicle for that, and we could potentially find ways of doing even a better job. So thank you, Thomas. Let's see. I think Tim has his hand raised. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, a couple of observations. Perhaps to the unwashed or the uninformed, a plan of conservation doesn't necessarily sound like it would have any impact over short-term rentals. Sounds like you're conserving land into land trust. So one, I would say, gee, perhaps there is a term that is more telegraphic in what the comprehensiveness of what this plan might be. But more importantly, I think that whatever we define it to be, and it needs to be defined, I think what we should do is look beyond ourselves and say, okay, to Liz's point earlier, what's the value of that in the Berkshires? What's the value of that in the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont? What's the value of that in other Marin County in California, if there is one there? I don't think people understand, nor do I, frankly, understand the benefits it could provide, nor do I think the name is necessarily telegraphic.
So the name is, it comes from state statutes. It's the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. And so,
but what I would tell you is there are many legal terms that people don't understand either, even though they're in the statutes. I guess what I would say is maybe there needs to be an explanation of it, because I think as you try and share this with the rank and file of human beings who live in these towns, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. And they may not know, that that town has a POCD. They may not know that either.
I'm sure they don't.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Anyone else? Oh, Bill, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, you have these very diverse towns all the way from Middletown to Saybrook, and I think you need to think big, going back to the Berkshires and try to define what we are from a regional perspective. We can't talk about all the little issues among the towns, but what are we? And I sit here in Middlefield and I go to Lyman's Orchard and I see people from New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, throughout the virus, everything, and they all come to this orchard. So how do we, again, what's the big way that we define this area? So if you're going, I was up in the Berkshires last weekend, and you go to the Berkshires, you don't even notice that you're in Adams, that you're in here. You just know you're going to the Berkshires. So how do you think big and get? When I was in Middletown, I always said that this was a region. Unfortunately, we had a lot of regions with dying cities and healthy suburban towns. But I always said Middletown was a region that could really work as a region because you had a healthy center city, you had healthy towns around it, and small towns and some suburban to the north. And so I guess it's just think big, not so much the details. How do we define the region and get everybody on board with that definition?
Great. Liz, go ahead. Oh, Liz, you're still muted.
There we go. All right. Just building on that again. And so I think, and this is all really obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. So we need to find the commonalities of all these towns, and that's how we promote the region. But then within that, we need to differentiate each town. I forgot who said that if Essex is the shipbuilding town and Chester is the art town. So we look at what are our unifying characteristics, and then we look at what are our unique characteristics. So it's like when you go to New York, you're either uptown or you go to Soho or whatever. So the meatpacking district, that kind of idea. And then I think, and this isn't a regional issue, but within each town we need to do that too. Like, I mean, we're not the only town, because I know Chester has a couple villages too, but like, we need to think about how our villages are different too and what they each want to be. That's just a Haddam issue. That's all.
Great. I'll go back. I'll call back on Tim.
Yeah, just one other thought building on what has all been said. The other place to look at, if you haven't looked at, is Cape Ann. It's probably closer to what we are than the Berkshires, given it's got an arts community, it's got shipbuilding, it's got the sea. I think even though it's all on the sea, or going towards the sea, probably more relevant as an area to look at and what they've done in Gloucester and all those places.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken who would like to chime in on this before we move on? We can always go back, but otherwise we'll move on with the presentation, and then we'll have another chance for some more question and answers. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Megan, and she will wrap this up. But before I do that, I would like to thank you for your for the discussion and for your input on these 5 questions. We're compiling them from all the 17 towns as we come and visit each of the towns and holding meetings like this. And your input is invaluable in providing us the information to create a comprehensive picture of our region for a document that's supposed to serve us for the next 10 years. And as I mentioned before, and as you see in the slide, if you have thoughts after this meeting and you want to type them down and get them to us, please email us with your name and what town you're from, just to remind us, to Senior Planner Megan Juflis, and her email address is mjuflis@rivercog.org. It's the email address right in front of you. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan. So go ahead, wrap this up.
Thanks, Sam. So as Sam said, we are so grateful for your participation in this process, and we will be compiling all of your comments with those that we've heard from the other towns to inform our policies, recommendations, and goals for the RPOCD. As we move forward, there are plenty of other opportunities for you to get involved. So these include visiting the website, rivercogregionalplan.org, signing up for email notifications, and sharing these presentations and outreach materials with others in your community. And if you do that, they are also welcome to send in their thoughts on all of these questions that we discussed today. Everyone's comments are welcome. Signing up for notifications means that you'll be kept informed of upcoming meetings, project news, and links to documents and presentations when they're posted online. You can also reach out to your RPC member via the link on the website with any thoughts, comments, or concerns. The RPC will be meeting regularly to review drafts of the RPOCD and direct the regional land use policies in it, and they're here to represent you. So let's review a breakdown of the anticipated timeline. We showed this at the introductory presentation, and it's also available on the project website so you can follow along with the progress. We kicked off the project in winter of 2019, and we anticipate completion in spring of 2021. We're still in phase 2 of this process at the municipal meetings, which you can see in the second column, second line. We'll be holding municipal meetings just like this one in each town across the region through July and August, and now we're looking like we might be trickling a little bit into September also. Concurrent with this outreach process, our team has also been hard at work on creating the existing conditions report for the region. The next step in this process after completing the municipal meetings is to provide a draft of the existing conditions report to the RPC for review. This is an opportunity for you to reach out to your town's RPC member via the link on the project website with your thoughts, comments, or concerns on key issues you see for your town or the region. You can also hear more about the existing conditions report in our introductory presentation that you can view on the website. Your RPC member can make sure that these items are sufficiently addressed as they review the report and answer any questions you may have. And with that, I guess we will open it back up to more questions.
So I don't know if there's any other questions generally about the process, about what we're doing, any other items that were not discussed that you would like to bring up. I also, in the very beginning, Raul joined us a little bit late. If you wanted to say a few words, Raul, as the representative from Haddam, we welcome you to say a few words if you'd like.
You're muted, Raul.
You're still muted, Raul. Must be a short. There you go. You're good.
I should know. I just wanted to thank those of you who were able to make it, and just tell them just let you know that this isn't the end of the process. So if you have some more thoughts, feel free to send them in writing to my email address, which I think you all have. And it was nice to be able to participate in this. I do regret that East Haddam didn't have more of a presence, but what can we do? We will try to get them next time, right, Sam?
Yeah, so I think we will still try to pursue some outreach from Haddam to make sure that they get represented in this process as well. So, but thank you for your effort. Any other questions or comments you may have? So we did set up an email address for Raul for this project. Although if you do have his personal email address, please feel free to use it. The email address we set up for him is haddamrpc@gmail.com. But also, if you do have his personal email address, feel free to use that as well. He will get any comments that you send to him to us. You also can contact RiverCOG staff directly. And we encourage you to check out the project website, rivercogregionalplan.org. That's where we're going to be putting recordings of meetings, draft documents, maps, and we hope we will get some traffic on that site as you take a look at what we have. And we also be posting notices for future meetings. If you contact us, we can get you on our mailing list, so you'll get an invite to future meetings. We will have some focus meetings on various topics coming up. Our regional planning commission meetings are public as well, as are the COG meetings, where these documents and drafts will be discussed. So we always welcome you to attend those meetings as well. So anything else that anyone wants to say, or any questions before we adjourn for the evening? Well, with that, I thank you for sharing part of your evening with us, and thank you for your interest in the beginning of our project. This document, to be relevant and useful, has to be it has to have a strong foundation in our town. So we thank you for providing us your input tonight, and we hope to check in with you over the course of this project in future events and different venues. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Raul.
Thank you.
Jim, good to see you.
Goodbye.